Captain Marcus Blackwood had served the Royal Guard of Eldoria for 23 years, but never had he felt the weight of duty more heavily than on this gray autumn morning. The castle corridors echoed with whispered conversations and hurried footsteps, as news spread through the ancient stone walls like wildfire. King Edmund lay dying, and with his final breath approaching, the delicate balance of power that had held the kingdom together for decades was about to shatter. Princess Isabella, barely 16 years old, sat in the castle's highest tower, her emerald eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the castle walls. She was supposed to be the future queen, the rightful heir to the Eldorian throne, but powerful forces within the court had other plans. Lady Vivienne Ashford, the king's second wife who had married into the royal family 5 years earlier, had been quietly building her own network of supporters, positioning herself to claim regency over the young princess should the king die before Isabella came of age. Marcus had watched this political maneuvering with growing unease. He had served under 3 generations of Eldorian monarchs, and he understood better than most how quickly loyalty could shift when power was at stake. Lady Vivienne was beautiful, intelligent, and ruthlessly ambitious. She had already convinced several key nobles that a young girl could not effectively rule a kingdom facing threats from neighboring realms and internal strife. The captain climbed the winding stairs to the tower, his heavy boots creating a steady rhythm against the stone steps. In his weathered hands, he carried a sealed letter bearing the king's personal seal, the last official command King Edmund would ever give. The dying monarch had summoned Marcus to his bedside 3 days earlier, his voice barely above a whisper, as he pressed the letter into the guard's hands. "This kingdom has survived for 800 years because we have never forgotten that the crown belongs to the rightful heir," the king had whispered, his once powerful voice now thin and fragile. "Promise me, Marcus, that you will see this command carried out, no matter what forces stand against you." Marcus had knelt beside the royal bed, accepting the weight of this final responsibility. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family, but this command would test that oath in ways he had never imagined. The letter contained instructions that would strip Lady Vivienne of any claim to regency and formally establish a council of trusted advisors to guide Princess Isabella until she reached her majority at 21. As he reached the tower door, Marcus could hear the soft sound of Princess Isabella's voice as she spoke quietly to her governess, Lady Margaret Thornfield. The elderly woman had served the royal family for 40 years and was one of the few people in the castle whom Marcus trusted completely. When he knocked gently on the wooden door, it was Lady Margaret who answered, her wise gray eyes immediately recognizing the gravity of the situation. "Captain Blackwood," she said softly, stepping aside to allow him entry. "We have been expecting you." Princess Isabella rose from her window seat, and Marcus was struck, as he always was, by how much she resembled her late mother, Queen Eleanor. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined set to her jaw, the same natural grace that spoke of noble breeding and inner strength. Despite her youth, there was something in her bearing that suggested she understood the storm that was about to break over the kingdom. "Your Highness," Marcus said, bowing deeply before extending the sealed letter. "Your father, His Majesty King Edmund, has entrusted me with his final royal command. It is to be opened only in the event of his death, and I am to ensure its contents are carried out precisely as written." The princess accepted the letter with steady hands, though Marcus could see the slight tremor that betrayed her emotional state. She had spent the past week watching her father fade away, knowing that his death would thrust her into a world of political intrigue and danger, for which she felt unprepared. "Lady Vivienne has been meeting with Duke Aldrich and Count Rothwell," Lady Margaret said quietly, her voice filled with concern. "They speak of the need for experienced leadership during these troubled times. I fear they plan to challenge your right to rule, my dear." Princess Isabella nodded, her expression growing more serious. "I have heard the whispers in the corridors. They think I am too young, too weak to wear the crown. Perhaps they are right." "No," Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying the conviction of his long service to the crown. "Your father chose you as his heir, not because of your age or your gender, but because he saw in you the qualities that make a true ruler. Strength is not always found in loud voices or bold gestures, Your Highness. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in quiet determination and unwavering principle." The sound of church bells began to toll across the kingdom, their deep, mournful notes carrying the news that everyone had been dreading. King Edmund was dead. In noble houses and common cottages throughout Eldoria, people would be stopping their daily activities to honor their fallen monarch and wonder what the future would bring under new leadership. Marcus felt the familiar weight of his sword at his side and the heavier weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The letter in Princess Isabella's hands contained the power to preserve the rightful succession, but only if he could navigate the dangerous political currents that were already beginning to swirl through the castle. Lady Vivian would not surrender her ambitions easily, and she had powerful allies who would support her claim to regency. "What must we do, Captain?" Princess Isabella asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Marcus looked out the tower window at the kingdom spread below them, the villages and farms, the forests and rivers that had been protected by Eldorian monarchs for centuries. Somewhere in those lands lived people who depended on stable leadership and just governance. They deserved better than the chaos that would surely follow if ambitious nobles were allowed to divide the kingdom among themselves. "We must trust in your father's wisdom, Your Highness," he said. "And we must be prepared to fight for what is right, regardless of the cost." As the sun began to set over the kingdom of Eldoria, 3 people stood in a castle tower, holding between them a piece of parchment that would determine the fate of a nation. None of them could have imagined how dramatically their lives were about to change, or how the events of the coming days would test every principle they held dear. The Game of Thrones had begun, and Marcus Blackwood knew that his 23 years of faithful service had been merely preparation for the greatest challenge of his life. The great hall of Eldoria Castle had been transformed into a sea of black silk and flickering candles for King Edmund's lying in state. Nobles from across the kingdom had arrived to pay their respects, but Marcus Blackwood could see that many of them were more interested in political positioning than genuine mourning. He stood at attention near the throne, his weathered face a mask of professional composure, while his sharp eyes tracked every conversation and meaningful glance exchanged among the assembled crowd. Lady Vivian Ashford moved through the gathering like a skilled dancer, her black mourning dress elegant and perfectly fitted, her golden hair arranged in a style that managed to be both respectful and striking. She paused at each group of nobles, offering comfort with just the right mixture of grief and strength, positioning herself as a stabilizing presence during this time of uncertainty. Marcus had to admit that she was masterful at the political game, perhaps too masterful. Duke Aldrich Ravencrest, a man whose family had controlled the northern provinces for 3 generations, stood near the great fireplace, surrounded by a cluster of younger nobles. His voice carried across the hall as he spoke about the challenges facing the kingdom and the need for experienced guidance. Count Wilhelm Rothwell nodded along, his calculating eyes fixed on Princess Isabella, who sat in quiet dignity beside her father's casket. The princess had insisted on maintaining the traditional 3-day vigil, despite Lady Margaret's concerns about her health and Marcus's worries about her safety. She wore simple black mourning attire, her hair pulled back in a severe style that made her look older than her 16 years. There was something in her posture, straight-backed and unwavering, that reminded Marcus of her grandmother, Queen Victoria the Strong, who had ruled Eldoria through 2 wars and a devastating plague. "The poor child looks so fragile," Lady Vivian said softly as she approached Marcus, her voice pitched to carry just far enough to be overheard by nearby courtiers. "I fear the weight of the crown may be too much for one so young. Perhaps it would be kinder to allow her a few more years of peaceful childhood before burdening her with the responsibilities of rule." Marcus turned to face Lady Vivian, his expression carefully neutral. "Her Highness has shown remarkable strength during this difficult time, my lady. The royal blood of 8 centuries runs in her veins." "Oh, I don't question her lineage, Captain," Lady Vivian replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But bloodlines cannot prepare a child for the realities of governance. The northern lords are restless, the treasury faces significant challenges, and there are rumors of movement along our eastern borders. These are not matters for a girl who has never ventured beyond castle walls." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion near the hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. Sir Garrett Stoneheart, the kingdom's most respected military commander, had arrived from the borderlands with a small escort of battle-hardened soldiers. His presence immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room, as everyone understood that his support would be crucial in the coming power struggle. Sir Garrett was a man of few words and fewer political ambitions. He had served the crown faithfully for 30 years, earning his reputation through decisive victories against external threats, rather than through court intrigue. His weathered face bore the scars of numerous battles, and his gray hair was pulled back in a simple warrior's knot. When he spoke, even the most powerful nobles listened. "Your Highness," Sir Garrett said, approaching Princess Isabella and dropping to one knee before her chair, "I have come to pledge my sword and my loyalty to the rightful heir of Eldoria. The border guards await your commands." The simple gesture sent ripples of tension through the assembled nobles. By publicly declaring his allegiance to Princess Isabella, Sir Garrett had forced everyone else to consider their own positions more carefully. Lady Vivian's smile became slightly strained, while Duke Aldrich's conversation group fell silent. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward the old warrior. Sir Garrett's support wouldn't guarantee Princess Isabella's peaceful succession, but it would make any attempt to usurp her authority significantly more difficult. The princess herself seemed to understand the importance of the moment, rising from her chair with natural grace. "Sir Garrett," she said, her young voice carrying clearly through the hall, "your loyalty honors both my father's memory and our kingdom. I accept your pledge with gratitude and humility." As the evening wore on, Marcus began to see the battle lines forming more clearly. The military and the common soldiers respected tradition and rightful succession. The merchant classes, who valued stability above all else, seemed inclined to support whoever could maintain peace and prosperity. But several powerful noble houses remained uncommitted, watching and waiting to see which way the political winds would blow. Lady Margaret approached Marcus as the formal ceremonies began to wind down. "The princess grows weary," she whispered, "but she refuses to leave her father's side. I fear she may collapse if she continues this vigil without rest." Quote. Marcus nodded, understanding the dilemma. The vigil was both a sacred duty and a political necessity. Any sign of weakness would be seized upon by her opponents. But the physical and emotional strain was clearly taking its toll on the young princess. "I will speak with her," he promised Lady Margaret. "Perhaps we can arrange for brief periods of rest without abandoning the vigil entirely." As he approached Princess Isabella, Marcus noticed Lady Vivian in quiet conversation with Duke Aldrich near the hall's far end. Their body language suggested intense discussion, and he caught fragments of words like Regency Council and immediate action. The political maneuvering was accelerating, and he knew that time was running short. "Your Highness," he said softly, positioning himself so that their conversation would be private, "your father's final command weighs heavily on my mind. When do you wish to reveal its contents?" Princess Isabella looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too mature for her young face. "After the funeral tomorrow, Captain. Let my father be laid to rest with proper ceremony before we face the storm that is coming." Marcus nodded, respecting her decision while privately calculating the risks of waiting. Every hour of delay gave Lady Vivian and her allies more time to consolidate their position and gather support. But he understood the princess's desire to honor her father's memory with appropriate solemnity. As the cathedral bells struck midnight, marking the beginning of the final day of the vigil, Marcus took up his position near the throne. Tomorrow would bring King Edmund's funeral, and with it, the moment when Princess Isabella would either claim her rightful inheritance or lose it forever to the ambitious forces gathering against her. The candles flickered in their holders, casting dancing shadows on the ancient stone walls of the great hall. In those shadows, Marcus could almost see the ghosts of previous monarchs who had faced similar challenges to their authority. History would judge them all by the choices they made in the coming hours. The last vigil had begun, and with it, the final test of loyalty, duty, and honor that would determine Eldoria's future. The morning of King Edmund's funeral dawned gray and cold, with a bitter wind that seemed to carry the weight of impending change through the castle corridors. Marcus Blackwood had not slept, choosing instead to maintain his watch over Princess Isabella and to observe the final preparations being made by various factions within the court. The sealed letter containing the king's last command remained hidden within his armor, its presence a constant reminder of the responsibility he bore. The funeral procession was scheduled to begin at midday, following centuries-old traditions that would see King Edmund laid to rest in the royal crypt beside his ancestors. But Marcus knew that the real drama would unfold after the ceremony, when the question of succession could no longer be delayed by ritual and mourning. Lady Vivian had spent the early morning hours in private meetings with key nobles, and her confidence seemed to grow with each passing hour. Princess Isabella stood in her chambers, being helped into her formal morning attire by Lady Margaret and two trusted servants. The heavy black velvet dress had been worn by royal women for generations during state funerals, and its weight seemed to symbolize the burden she was about to inherit. Despite her youth, she carried herself with a dignity that impressed everyone who saw her, though Marcus could see the strain around her eyes. "Are you prepared for what comes after the funeral, Your Highness?" Marcus asked quietly as Lady Margaret made final adjustments to the princess's mourning veil. "As prepared as one can be for such things, Captain," Isabella replied, her voice steady but soft. "My father spent many hours teaching me about statecraft and diplomacy, but I suspect the reality will be far more challenging than any lesson." A sharp knock at the chamber door interrupted their conversation. Sir Thomas Hartwell, the castle's chief steward, entered with obvious agitation written across his weathered features. He had served the royal household for 15 years and was known for his unflappable demeanor, making his current distress all the more concerning. "Your Highness," he said, bowing quickly before addressing his urgent news. "Lady Vivian has requested an immediate meeting of the Royal Council following the funeral ceremony. She claims to have important matters of state that cannot wait for the traditional period of mourning." Marcus felt his jaw tighten at this news. The Royal Council had not been convened during the immediate aftermath of a monarch's death in over 2 centuries. Such a move could only be intended to force a premature discussion of regency and succession, catching Princess Isabella off guard when she should be focused on honoring her father's memory. "On whose authority does Lady Vivian call such a meeting?" Princess Isabella asked, her voice taking on a harder edge that reminded Marcus of her father's tone during difficult court sessions. "She claims the authority of her position as the late king's wife and her concern for the kingdom's immediate stability." "Your Highness," Sir Thomas replied uncomfortably. "Duke Aldrich and Count Rothwell have already indicated their intention to attend." Marcus exchanged a meaningful look with Lady Margaret, both of them understanding the implications of this development. Lady Vivian was moving more quickly than anticipated, attempting to seize control of the narrative before Princess Isabella could present her father's final command to the court. "Then we shall attend this meeting as well," Princess Isabella declared, straightening her shoulders beneath the heavy mourning dress. "As the rightful heir to the throne, I have every right to participate in discussions concerning the kingdom's future." The funeral ceremony itself passed with appropriate solemnity and grandeur. The great cathedral was filled to capacity with nobility, clergy, foreign ambassadors, and representatives of the common people. Princess Isabella walked behind her father's casket with perfect composure, though Marcus, walking in the honor guard beside the procession, could see the tears she struggled to contain. Archbishop Michael delivered a stirring eulogy that celebrated King Edmund's 40-year reign and his dedication to justice and prosperity for all Eldorians. The ancient hymns echoed through the cathedral's vaulted ceilings, and even the most hardened political operators seemed genuinely moved by the ceremony's dignity and tradition. But as soon as the final prayers were spoken and the royal casket was sealed within the stone crypt, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Lady Vivian moved through the dispersing crowd with purposeful grace, quietly reminding key attendees of the council meeting she had called. Marcus noticed that several foreign ambassadors lingered nearby, clearly interested in the political developments that would determine their future diplomatic relationships. The Royal Council chamber had been hastily prepared for an emergency session, with the ancient oak table polished and chairs arranged according to traditional protocol. Lady Vivian entered first, taking a seat near the head of the table with an air of authority that suggested she considered herself the natural leader of this gathering. Duke Aldrich, Count Rothwell, and several other prominent nobles followed, their expressions ranging from calculating to openly ambitious. Princess Isabella entered last, accompanied by Marcus and Lady Margaret. Her mourning attire made her appear smaller than usual in the grand chamber, but there was something in her bearing that commanded attention. She moved to the chair that had always been reserved for the heir apparent, directly opposite the throne-like seat reserved for the ruling monarch. "My lords and ladies," Lady Vivian began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "We gather at this difficult time to address the immediate challenges facing our kingdom. While we all mourn the loss of our beloved King Edmund, we cannot allow grief to blind us to the urgent needs of the realm."
"With respect, my lady," Princess Isabella interrupted, her young voice cutting through Lady Vivian's practiced rhetoric, "I was not aware that anyone other than the rightful heir or the Royal Council's elected chairman had the authority to convene emergency sessions."
Several nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while Duke Aldrich leaned forward with obvious interest in the developing confrontation. "Your Highness," Lady Vivian replied smoothly, "in times of crisis we must sometimes set aside rigid protocol in favor of practical action. The kingdom faces numerous challenges that require immediate attention and experienced leadership." "What challenges, specifically?" Princess Isabella asked, her tone remaining respectful but firm. Count Rothwell cleared his throat and consulted a prepared document. "The northern provinces report increased bandit activity that may be connected to foreign agents. The royal treasury shows concerning expenditures that exceed recent tax revenues, and there are unconfirmed reports of military movements along our eastern borders." Marcus listened to these claims with growing suspicion. While each issue was potentially legitimate, their convenient timing and presentation suggested careful orchestration rather than genuine crisis. Lady Vivienne and her allies were painting a picture of a kingdom on the brink of chaos, requiring immediate and experienced intervention. "These are serious matters indeed," Princess Isabella acknowledged. "As the rightful heir to the throne, I am prepared to address each of them with appropriate deliberation and counsel from trusted advisors." "But Your Highness," Duke Aldrich interjected, "surely you recognize that such complex issues require years of experience and extensive knowledge of statecraft. Perhaps a Regency Council could provide the necessary guidance until you reach a more mature age?" The trap was being sprung exactly as Marcus had anticipated. By presenting a crisis that demanded immediate action, Lady Vivian's faction was creating justification for bypassing the normal succession and establishing a regency that they would control. Princess Isabella looked around the table at the assembled faces, reading the political currents with impressive skill for someone so young. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new note of authority that surprised even Marcus. "My lords, before we discuss regency arrangements or emergency measures, I believe you should all be aware of my father's final command to this realm." She gestured to Marcus, who rose from his position along the chamber wall and approached the table. With deliberate ceremony, he withdrew the sealed letter from within his armor and placed it before Princess Isabella. This letter bears King Edmund's personal seal and contains his final royal command, given to me 3 days before his death, with instructions that it be opened only after his funeral, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the weight of official proclamation. The political atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Lady Vivian's confident expression faltered, while several previously uncommitted nobles leaned forward with intense interest. Everyone understood that a dying monarch's final command carried tremendous legal and moral authority that would be difficult to challenge. Princess Isabella broke the royal seal with steady hands and unfolded the parchment, her eyes quickly scanning the contents before she looked up at the assembled council. In that moment, Marcus saw something change in her expression. A transformation from uncertain girl to resolute ruler. "My father's final command addresses precisely the concerns that have been raised today," she said, her voice now carrying unmistakable royal authority. "And it provides clear instructions for the governance of this realm during the transition period." The chamber fell silent as everyone waited to learn their fate, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the future of the Kingdom of Eldoria. The parchment crackled slightly in Princess Isabella's hands as she prepared to read her father's final command to the assembled royal council. Marcus could feel the tension in the chamber like a living thing, pressing against everyone present as political fortunes hung in the balance. Lady Vivienne's composed mask had slipped just enough to reveal the calculation beneath, while Duke Aldrich and Count Rothwell exchanged concerned glances. "By the authority vested in me as King of Eldoria and defender of its ancient laws," Princess Isabella began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I, Edmund Aldwin Ravencroft, third of his name, do hereby establish the terms of succession and governance that shall take effect immediately upon my death." The formal language of the royal decree seemed to transform the young princess before their eyes. Standing at the head of the ancient council table, illuminated by the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, she embodied the unbroken lineage of 8 centuries of Eldorian monarchy. "First," she continued, "I do confirm and establish my daughter, Isabella Eleanor Ravencroft, as the sole and rightful heir to the throne of Eldoria, to rule in her own name upon reaching her 17th birthday, which shall be considered her legal majority for the purposes of royal succession." The traditional age of majority was 21, but kings had the authority to alter succession requirements for their direct heirs. By moving Isabella's legal majority to 17 to less than 8 months away, King Edmund had dramatically shortened any potential regency period. Second, Princess Isabella read on. "Until such time as the rightful heir reaches her majority, the governance of the realm shall be overseen by a council of regency consisting of 5 members, each selected for their proven loyalty to the crown and their dedication to the welfare of all Eldorians." Lady Vivian leaned forward slightly, clearly hoping to hear her name among the regent appointments. Several other nobles showed similar anticipation, their political calculations evident in their expressions. "The Council of Regency shall consist of Sir Garrett Stoneheart, commander of the royal forces, Lady Margaret Thornfield, keeper of the royal household, Archbishop Michael Hartwell, representing the spiritual welfare of the kingdom, Sir Edmund Blackthorne, Chief Justice of the Royal Courts, and Captain Marcus Blackwood of the Royal Guard, who shall serve as chairman of the Regency Council." The silence that followed this announcement was profound. Marcus felt the weight of unexpected responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak, while around the table, carefully laid political plans crumbled into dust. Lady Vivian's face had gone pale, her dreams of regency power dissolving in an instant. Furthermore, Princess Isabella continued, her confidence growing with each sentence, "This decree explicitly states that no person who has married into the royal family after the birth of the confirmed heir shall have any claim to regency powers or authority over the succession, regardless of their relationship to the deceased monarch." Duke Aldrich was the first to find his voice. "Your Highness, with all due respect to your late father's wisdom, surely such important decisions require broader consultation with the established nobility? The challenges facing the kingdom are precisely the reason why my father chose regents based on proven service rather than political ambition." Princess Isabella interrupted, showing a flash of steel that reminded everyone present of her royal heritage. "Each member of the Regency Council has dedicated their life to serving Eldoria's interests above their own." Count Rothwell stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "This is highly irregular. The Royal Council has always had a voice in regency appointments. We cannot simply accept—" "You can, and you will," a new voice said from the chamber's entrance. Sir Garrett Stoneheart strode into the room, still wearing his travel-stained military attire and bearing the unmistakable authority of a man accustomed to command. "Unless you wish to challenge the legal authority of a king's final command, that would be treason, my lord." The military commander's presence immediately shifted the balance of power in the room. Behind him came Archbishop Michael, his religious robes lending additional legitimacy to the proceedings, followed by Sir Edmund Blackthorne, whose reputation as an honest and impartial judge was known throughout the kingdom. Lady Margaret, who had remained quietly supportive throughout the confrontation, stepped forward to stand beside Princess Isabella. The 5 regents named in the king's decree now represented a united front that would be difficult for any ambitious nobles to challenge. "My lords and ladies," Marcus said, accepting his new role as chairman of the Regency Council, "King Edmund's final command is clear and legally binding. Princess Isabella will continue her education in statecraft under the guidance of the appointed regents until her 17th birthday, at which time she will assume full royal authority." "And what of the immediate challenges facing the kingdom?" Lady Vivian asked, making one final attempt to insert herself into the power structure. "Surely my experience and connections could be valuable during this transition period." Sir Garrett answered with military directness. "Lady Vivian, your expertise in court protocol and social matters is noted. However, the governance of the realm requires different skills. The Regency Council will address all legitimate concerns about kingdom security and administration. Princess Isabella placed the royal decree on the council table where everyone could see King Edmund's seal and signature. My lords, I understand that this transition may not align with all of your expectations or preferences, but I hope you will remember that we all serve the same kingdom and the same people. She paused, looking directly at each person around the table. The choices we make in the coming months will determine whether Eldoria emerges from this transition stronger and more united, or whether we allow political division to weaken us at a time when we need strength. Duke Aldrich and Count Rothwell exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their position now that their original plans had been completely undermined. Without Lady Vivian's claim to regency, their own political maneuvering had lost much of its purpose and potential reward. Your Highness, Duke Aldrich said carefully, House Ravencrest has always been loyal to the crown. If this is your father's will, then we shall respect and support it. Other nobles around the table began to offer similar assurances, their pragmatic instincts taking over as they realized the futility of opposing a clearly established succession backed by military force, legal authority, and religious sanction. Lady Vivian remained silent for several long moments, her ambitious dreams clearly shattered, but her dignity still intact. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the resignation of someone who understood that the game was over. Of course, Your Highness. I shall continue to serve the royal household in whatever capacity may be appropriate. Marcus watched this capitulation with a mixture of relief and wariness. Lady Vivienne was too intelligent and ambitious to simply disappear from court politics entirely. But for now, the immediate crisis had passed, and Princess Isabella's rightful inheritance was secure. As the emergency council session drew to a close, Marcus realized that his life was about to change dramatically. From guardian and protector, he would now become a regent and advisor, helping to guide a young woman toward her destiny as queen while protecting the kingdom from whatever challenges lay ahead. The hardest battles he suspected were still to come. 3 months had passed since that pivotal day in the Royal Council chamber, and Captain Marcus Blackwood found himself adapting to responsibilities he had never imagined when he first took his oath to serve the crown. The autumn had given way to a harsh winter, and with the changing seasons came new challenges that tested both the Regency Council's authority and Princess Isabella's growing confidence as the future queen. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of the council chamber, as Marcus reviewed reports from across the kingdom. The transition had not been entirely smooth. Several minor noble houses had initially resisted the regency arrangement, preferring to deal with what they considered a more manageable political structure. But Sir Garrett's firm handling of a border dispute and Archbishop Michael's diplomatic success in resolving a trade disagreement with neighboring kingdoms had gradually established the council's credibility. Princess Isabella entered the chamber with a stack of correspondence, her bearing noticeably more confident than it had been during those difficult days following her father's funeral. The months of intensive education in statecraft, economics, and diplomacy had transformed her from a grieving girl into a capable young woman who was beginning to understand the complexities of rule. Captain, she said, taking her customary seat at the council table, I've received concerning reports from the eastern provinces. It seems the rumors Count Rothwell mentioned were not entirely fabricated. Marcus looked up from his documents with sharp attention. The eastern borders had remained quiet throughout the winter, but the spring thaw often brought renewed activity from hostile neighbors who found travel easier in warmer weather. What specific intelligence have you received, Your Highness? Lord Commander Garrett sent a coded dispatch early this morning. His scouts have confirmed unusual military movements in the kingdom of Valethorn, approximately 50 miles from our border. It appears they may be testing our readiness during the Regency period. This news required immediate attention from the full Regency Council. Marcus sent word to the other council members, and within an hour, all 5 regents had assembled to discuss the potential threat. Sir Garrett spoke first, his weathered face grim as he unrolled a map of the eastern territories. Valethorn has been probing our defenses for weeks, likely hoping to find weakness during our political transition. Their forces are not large enough for a full invasion, but they could cause significant damage to border communities if left unchecked. What are their likely objectives? Princess Isabella asked, studying the map with the focused attention her tutors had taught her to apply to military matters. Territory, primarily, Sir Garrett replied. There are 3 prosperous farming valleys just inside our border that would significantly increase Velthorn's agricultural capacity. They may also be testing whether the Regency government has the will and ability to respond to external threats. Archbishop Michael leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Have we considered diplomatic solutions? Perhaps King Aldwin of Velthorn would respond to negotiations rather than military pressure. King Aldwin respects strength above diplomacy. Sir Garrett said, any attempt at negotiation from a position of perceived weakness would likely encourage further aggression. Marcus found himself thinking not just as a soldier, but as a regent responsible for the kingdom's long-term stability. This situation presented both immediate danger and an opportunity to demonstrate that the Regency government could handle serious threats effectively. Your Highness, he said, this decision ultimately rests with you as the rightful heir. How do you wish to respond? Princess Isabella was quiet for several moments, considering the implications of her choice. Marcus could see her mental processes at work, weighing military necessity against diplomatic possibilities. Considering the precedent her decision would set for future challenges to Eldorian authority. Sir Garrett, she said finally, what would be the minimum force necessary to make Velthorn reconsider their current course of action? 1,000 well-equipped soldiers positioned strategically along the border, supported by our cavalry units for rapid response capability. Enough to demonstrate serious intent without appearing overly aggressive. And the cost of maintaining such a force? Sir Edmund Blackthorne, who had been reviewing financial documents, provided the fiscal analysis. Approximately 2,000 gold sovereigns per month, assuming a deployment of 6 weeks' duration. Well within our current treasury capabilities. Princess Isabella nodded, her decision crystallizing. Then we shall deploy the force as Sir Garrett recommends. Additionally, I want clear messages sent to other neighboring kingdoms that Eldoria remains strong and unified despite our transition period. A wise decision, Your Highness, Marcus said, proud of how carefully she had considered all aspects of the situation. It demonstrates both strength and measured judgment. The deployment proceeded smoothly over the following 2 weeks. Sir Garrett's reputation preceded him to the eastern border, and his presence with a substantial military force quickly convinced King Aldwin that testing Eldoria's resolve was more costly than beneficial. The Velthorn forces withdrew without any actual conflict, and the border returned to its normal state of watchful peace. But the incident had important consequences beyond its immediate resolution. Throughout the kingdom, word spread that the Regency government had handled its first major test with competence and decisiveness. Princess Isabella's reputation grew as nobles and common people alike recognized that she was developing into a capable future ruler under excellent guidance. Lady Vivian, who had maintained a low profile since her political defeat, requested a private audience with Princess Isabella during this period of renewed confidence. Marcus accompanied the princess to this meeting, curious about what the former queen consort might want to discuss. Your Highness, Lady Vivian said, her manner respectful but direct, I owe you an apology for my actions following your father's death. My concern for the kingdom's stability led me to make assumptions about your readiness to rule that have proven incorrect. Princess Isabella accepted this apology with gracious dignity. Lady Vivian, I understand that you acted from genuine concern for Eldoria's welfare. There are no personal grievances that need addressing. I would like to request permission to withdraw from court life, Lady Vivian continued. I have family estates in the southern provinces where I could be useful in regional administration, away from the political complications of the capital. This request surprised Marcus, though he recognized its wisdom. Lady Vivian's continued presence at court would always carry the potential for political complications, even if she had abandoned her ambitions for regency power. If that is your preference, Lady Vivian, I see no reason to deny such a request, Princess Isabella replied. Your administrative skills could indeed be valuable in the southern region. As spring progressed towards summer, Marcus found himself looking ahead to Princess Isabella's 17th birthday with a mixture of anticipation and concern. The regency period had been successful, establishing the young princess as a competent future ruler while maintaining kingdom stability. But the transition to full royal authority would bring new challenges and responsibilities. The kingdom of Eldoria had survived its most vulnerable period, emerging stronger and more confident in its leadership. The political crisis that had threatened to tear the realm apart had instead forged a new understanding of what it meant to serve the crown and the people rather than personal ambition. Standing in the castle's highest tower one evening, watching the sunset paint the kingdom's lands in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all to this moment. A dying king's final command had preserved not just the rightful succession, but the very principles that made Eldoria worth defending. Princess Isabella joined him at the window, no longer the uncertain girl who had sat in this same tower months earlier, but a young woman ready to claim her birthright and lead her people into whatever future awaited them.
"Are you ready, Your Highness?" Marcus asked quietly. "As ready as anyone can be for such a destiny, Captain," she replied. "But I know now that readiness isn't about having all the answers. It's about surrounding yourself with people who share your commitment to doing what is right." The bells of the cathedral began to ring across the kingdom, calling the faithful to evening prayers, and marking another day in the long history of a realm that had weathered yet another storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and new opportunities to prove that honor and duty still meant something in a world often driven by ambition and greed. Marcus Blackwood had carried out his king's final command, and in doing so, had helped preserve a kingdom and prepare a future queen. The story of the royal guard who delivered an order that changed everything had reached its conclusion, but the greater story of Eldoria's future was just beginning.